All righty. Well, we are 2 minutes after 11, so I'll go ahead and get started and we'll let more people trickle in. So welcome. My name is Rebecca Bilderback and I'm the Kansas LTAP Director. And thank you for joining us for our special edition of the Roundabout webinar in partnership with KDOT. The series is dedicated to the Drive to Zero initiative, and we're kicking this off through the Roundabout, but going forward, this Drive to Zero series will be a standalone program. So again, thanks for joining us today, and please feel free to add your names in the chat so we can all get acquainted. And in the meantime, I'm going to quickly go over some housekeeping rules. So just so you know, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel. And please remember to keep yourself muted unless you are directly engaging with webinar conversation. And then we will have time at the end to answer questions, but feel free to add questions in the chat as they come up. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Haley Doherty with KDOT.
Thanks, Rebecca. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for attending this special edition of the Roundabout. My name is Haley Doherty. I am the State Highway Safety Engineer at KDOT, and I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker this morning, Nicole Waldheim. Nicole is a principal with Fehr Peers and a nationally recognized multimodal safety expert. She has 20 years of experience in transportation planning and policy and has spent over a decade specializing in safety planning. Throughout her career, Nicole has led over 50 safety plans, including strategic highway safety plans, regional and local safety plans, and Vision Zero efforts. Nicole was one of the co-authors for the NCHRP 08-171 project, which is institutionalizing the safe system approach in transportation planning and programming, which is the content for today's webinar. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you, Nicole.
Thanks, Haley. I forgot to give you a fun fact about myself. So the one I always like to give is that I was a nationally ranked javelin thrower in college. So if there's any questions about javelin throwing, especially since we're in like an Olympic season, let me know. All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's Kansas LTAP special edition Roundabout webinar. As Haley mentioned, my name is Nicole, and I'm looking forward to spending the next hour with you. Today's session, so from policy to pavement, embedding safety in all we do, focuses on foundational ideas to institutionalize safety into planning and programming. So you'll probably hear me say that a lot as I continue to make the connection back to that concept of institutionalization. So this webinar is organized into 3 parts. First, I'll briefly lay some groundwork for safe system implementation, and then we're really going to get into the exciting stuff for most of the webinar. I'm going to walk through a set of practical tools that help translate safe system principles into routine practices, so the things that you do every day. And then we're going to have some poll questions throughout, and then if we've got time, close with Q&A and discussion and reflection on how some of these tools will apply locally. So today's webinar, just to make sure you're in the right place, it's like when you get on a plane, like we're going to Chicago, are you in the right place? It's about helping all of you take the safe system approach from a good idea, something that you think about, to something that you actually use and implement every single day. A lot of you, I know, already support the safe system. And so now the next piece really becomes, how can you take your safety efforts and incorporate them into all of your decision making? And I know you're thinking, well, that seems like a lot, right? I have several things that I need to consider and incorporate into my transportation decision making every day. How do I do this? And I think kind of just like baseline level set. Ultimately, I think that we can all agree that no matter what the decisions are, our top priority as transportation professionals should be figuring out how to prevent deaths on the transportation networks that we are responsible for. So this session is designed for agencies looking to make system-wide organizational safety change and not just apply safety to one-off projects. Ultimately, hopefully you learned something today. The goal is to make safety the easy and the obvious choice, so not something that we have to fight for every time, but something that's built into the process. And then today, I'm going to focus on practical ways to help you start embedding some of these safe system thinking and concepts into work you're already doing. We're not trying to create more work. We're going to focus on what you're already doing. So everybody has seen the safe system approach wheel. This is the Kansas specific wheel. I'm not going to talk about the wheel. What I'm going to talk about is, I think for local agencies and MPOs, the shift to safe system integration is really important. Traditionally, and even still currently, safety may have lived with just one person, one team, under one funding source, or under one plan. And I think that probably resonates with a lot of folks that are listening today. But it's not a sustainable approach for any one person or one team to really take it all on. But in addition to that, it also means that safety is often siloed from the day-to-day overall transportation decision making. If safety is really only showing up as part of your individual safety efforts, it's not going to consistently influence capital projects, resurfacing decisions, development review, or other things. So it's really important to pivot and again, start integrating safety into everyone's responsibility and then the workflows that you already have in place. And again, this all comes back to the point of the webinar, which is how to make the shift to having the safe system be utilized in part of everything that you do. So to achieve the full potential of the safe system ideas, institutionalization is really essential. As I mentioned before, it's hard work, right? This is not an easy thing to do. Agencies really have to start thinking about aligning internal policies and goals, to start thinking about how staff roles are potentially shifting, what performance metrics look like, and then of course the funding. You know, how can we fund all of these things in tandem with everything else? In addition to those challenges, it does also require us to think outside of the box from that kind of reactive mitigation safety approach to really thinking about and incorporating other strategies that can reduce vehicle miles of travel and also reduce that exposure and likelihood to a crash. So some of the upstream strategies and things that are also kind of part of what I'll be talking about today and are in the toolkit is things like compact land use, public transportation, transportation demand management, you know, how different income levels affect travel, and other things. So these are also important factors to think about when you're planning safety improvements. And then lastly, to bring all of these kind of safety elements together, it often requires a rethinking of your partnerships and your cross-sector collaboration and your leadership. So going back to the last slide, no one person or team or plan can really do this alone. So it's not easy. It's okay. But an entire toolkit was recently developed. It's got 30 tool fact sheets, and it presents strategies and real-world examples to help agencies like you integrate the safe system approach over time into all aspects of planning and programming. And I'm going to go through 11 of those tools today. So the toolkit itself is not published yet. This is like hot off the presses stuff that you're getting here. But it is part of the National Cooperative Highway Research Project 08171, institutionalizing the safe system approach in transportation planning and programming. And the toolkit, again, made up of 30 tools. It is designed to support agencies like yourselves in turning the safe system concepts into everyday practice. Again, I'm going to discuss 11 of the 30 today, and they were really chosen based on relevance to the audience. If you're curious about all 30, one of my colleagues is on the phone today, Caroline, and she can kind of drop the full list of all 30 in the chat just so you can see what others are. Again, this isn't published yet, but if you're curious about any of those, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to kind of talk you through them. So now let's just take a quick break. I'll take a sip of water. Just want to get a sense. We're going to pull up a quick poll here of which best describes where your agency is with the safe system approach. Are you just getting started? Are you feel like you're applying it to individual projects, maybe across programs or policies, or heck, maybe it's institutionalized? And if it is, I would love for you all to drop some examples in the chat as we go through today. All right, it's looking like most folks are still getting started or applying it to individual projects. A few not sure yet. All right. And then I think, do I need to share results, Kara? Or looks like, okay. Can everyone see the poll results?
Yes.
Okay, great. So perfect. Yeah, as I mentioned, it looks like really a mix of just getting started to applying it to individual projects. So thanks for taking that. I can stop sharing. All right, so now we're going to transition into the main section of the webinar and discuss those 11 tools. Each tool is organized the same, where I'm going to provide an overview of it and then an example of how other agencies have applied the tool. So if you are doing any of these things, as I mentioned, please pop them into the chat as we go. This is definitely a learning experience for all of us as we continue on this integration journey. The toolkit itself, when it is published, is organized under these 4 themes. I'm going to touch on tools in each of these, but theme A focuses on building a strong commitment and culture of safety. Theme B is on aligning policies and budgets with safety goals. Theme C is embedding safety in design and project procedures. And then theme D is on coordinating land use and transportation decisions, as those also impact safety. So in total, theme A has 6 tools, theme B has 9, theme C has 6, and theme D has 9 as well. So let's get into it. This is theme A, and these tools are talking about building that genuine organization-wide commitment to safety. It's about creating a culture where everyone whose work touches roadway safety, from elected officials to staff to even media partners, really understands the role that they play, because when everyone understands their part, it really starts to influence both what we do and how we talk about it. So again, this theme has 6 tools, and I'm going to talk about 3 of those today. So this first tool is about making sure elected officials, agency leaders, commissioners, and staff really understand how their decisions impact safety. As you know, all of these people influence budgets, land use plans, policies, staffing, and infrastructure investment. So if they're not on board with the safe system approach, it almost makes it impossible to really embed safety into everyday decision making. So training and education is an effective way to get leaders in your court. You can just start with safe system fundamentals, so things like why there are crashes, the impact they have, and how policy and design decisions influence severe crashes. But even more powerful than just a conversation or a classroom session or a PowerPoint is just bringing people into the field. So those hands-on experiences like walking audits or bike rides, so leaders can really see those trade-offs firsthand. As you all are probably thinking, training can also be tailored. So you'd want maybe more like higher level, system level discussions for leadership, and then practical field training for staff. And then another cool program that some agencies are doing is actually a train the trainer program, as that's really building and getting people invested in safety, teaching others, and then they're able to teach others. So that's been really successful in some places. Other agencies have created a culture of safety roadmap, and it basically shows how each employee's role connects to safety. And a lot of folks are using that during the new hire onboarding process. And then just a pro tip, training anyone on the safe system approach really requires a clear emphasis on why change is necessary, and particularly the human piece of it. So really relating it back to humans and why we care about other people is very important. But the other thing that I've noticed people really respond to is data in funding considerations. So if training can really highlight how safety investments align with broader goals, economic growth, community well-being, that really goes a long way. So this is an example of leadership and staff training. It comes from North Carolina. All of the examples I'm going to show today are out of state, but we'll talk about how they can apply in Kansas. The North Carolina Vision Zero Leadership Institute, it's an annual team-based training, and it's designed to help local agencies, including elected officials, either launch or strengthen their safety efforts. So the program does combine some safety 101 presentations with interactive planning sessions, but one of the most valuable components is the dedicated team time, and it's where agencies can really work on concrete next steps to their own challenges. And just this environment and being in it really creates buy-in and a sense of responsibility to address safety needs. Participants do also receive ongoing technical assistance, including support with coalition building. So the education doesn't end after one time. I think that's another important point. Sometimes we feel like we educate and we're done. It doesn't end there. And then how does this apply in Kansas? I do think any local agency or MPO could replicate this model just by convening your own cross-departmental safety team and hosting a training and facilitated workshop on safety. I think the key is just really building in that dedicated team time to learn about safety, ask questions, and then leave with some sort of charge or homework that doesn't end there. So I like this tool. This tool I think is cool. We're always trying to think through how do we engage emergency responders in our planning and programming efforts. Well, here's how. So this next tool is about aligning emergency services goal. This tool is really important because it talks about ways to engage emergency responders in safety conversations early. This is really crucial as they potentially often maybe always have concerns about how safety interventions could impact response time and evacuation routes, as they should. But if they aren't engaged up front, safe system strategies can often stall. We've seen this happen quite a bit. So how have folks dealt with this? Local agencies and MPOs have found that by working together with EMS, there's several opportunities for win-win solutions. So a couple of examples are, testing roundabouts or speed humps with fire vehicles, exploring upgrades like traffic signal preemption for emergency vehicles, and then coordinating on right-of-way allocation. So another win-win is that first responders frequently interact with the public. They're often in schools or often out at community events. So if they are brought into the solutions and engaged, they're 100 times more likely to also be a key partner to help educate communities about traffic calming and why it's important. And then one more another win-win is that traffic calming measures do reduce speed. That's their intent, which ultimately hopefully leads to fewer severe crashes, and that can reduce the burden on emergency responders so they're able to spread their time and go to other places that are more in need. So again, the goal is not to choose between safety and emergency access. It's to design for both of those, and when you do collaborate and reduce barriers, it really eases that interdepartmental tension. So here's a cool example. This is in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So there were concerns, this might resonate with some folks, that converting 4-lane roads to 3 might slow down emergency response time. So instead of debating, they looked at the data, and the city analyzed EMS response times before and after the conversions. And they also surveyed emergency responders about their real-world experiences. And what they found that there was no statistically significant change in response times. The results were shared openly. It helped ease concerns, and it built trust with the emergency service partner. So ultimately, that process really removed a major barrier to implementing safer roadway designs. It just gave everyone more confidence moving forward with similar projects. And then the last tool in this particular section is about establishing accountability in your safety work through monitoring and evaluation. So if safety is truly going to be a priority at an agency, it has to be grounded in data and measurable results. It can't just be passion and good intentions. Those are important too, but it can't just be that. The SAFE system can't also rely on a few committed champions or assumptions about what's working. It needs clear benchmarks, transparent reporting, and a willingness to adjust strategies based on what the data is showing you. So this tool is important for institutionalizing the SAFE system because it really provides transparency into what you are doing and the results. It's helping you, it's helping the public, it's helping leaders. One way that agencies are building this accountability in, and many of you have probably done this through your SS4A plans, is establishing a multidisciplinary task force that really brings together staff from across different departments and regional partners. And that group, as hopefully some of you have realized, can really keep SAFE system principles on the agenda. It helps remove barriers, and it makes sure that safety is consistently integrated into projects and policies. So if you have one of these task force, don't end it when your plan is done. Keep it in place. Agencies also use tools like public safety dashboards to track both outputs, so what we said we would do, and outcomes, whether those actions are. Did I just drop off?
Yeah, we lost you for a second there.
Okay, let me reshare. Sorry about that. I'm even in the office today. My Wi-Fi is good. All right, back up.
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Second. This number. Okay. All right. So again, monitoring and evaluation really important. Let me skip to the example here. So this is a good one. This is from Bellevue, Washington. They actually created a public-facing dashboard to track their Vision Zero and SAFE system commitments. So again, instead of safety living in a plan on a shelf, it's very visible to everybody. Their dashboard is pretty cool. It shows what projects are being delivered. It also tracks outcomes like trends in serious and fatal crashes. That level of transparency really enforces accountability because the community can actually see what's been promised and what's changing. They also share their high injury network to focus leaders on investing on the corridors with the greatest risk, which is helping to prioritize limited resources. And then also by regularly analyzing the data, they're also evaluating whether specific countermeasures are working or not. In addition, a local example that Max made me aware of yesterday is the Lawrence Douglas County MPO has a public-facing crash data dashboard. So Max, if you could drop that in the chat, and Caroline, if you could drop the Bellevue example in the chat, people can take a look at those. So with that, again, I mentioned there are 6 tools in this particular commitment and culture to safety category. I went through 3 of those today. So Kara, if you could just pull up the poll in terms of, if any of these toolkits you feel like could make a difference in your jurisdiction in the near term, and or if you feel like this question isn't relevant, maybe what else could help you in the near term, or if you've got specific examples or cool things to share, please pop those into the chat as well. I am not looking at the chat, but I know people are. So yeah, Haley, if anything neat pops up, feel free to share it with the group as we're doing this poll. All right, so it looks like the couple that are popping to the top are training elected officials and agencies, and also establishing accountability and monitoring. A little bit less with the emergency services goal, so hopefully that is not a challenge in your community. All right, so we can stop sharing that. And let's keep going. So we got a bunch more tools to still get through. All right, so this is theme B, and theme B is focused on aligning policies and budgets with the SAFE system approach. So it means asking how every dollar you spend can move you closer to safety outcomes. This theme in the ultimate research has 9 tools, but I'm going to go through 4 today. And this first one I really like. There's a cool example for this one. So This particular tool is about expanding how agencies think about safety funding and allocation. So instead of treating safety as something that you only pursue through funding for hotspot projects or occasional grants, it really encourages making safety a fundamental part of every transportation investment. One important point here, supporting the idea of making every dollar a safety dollar, is that safety improvements shouldn't be scattershot. And I think we've all seen that the implications or outcomes of this. So too often limited funding really gets spread thinly across the system instead of being applied strategically where need and risk is highest. So safe system investments need the right dose in the highest risk environments, and leveraging all of your funding resources can really better help with that. So there's three key ways that agencies are doing this or thinking about their funding sources. First is they're really optimizing existing all transportation funding sources by taking inventory of what's available and then identifying opportunities to leverage those to also fund safety projects. Second thing is agencies are doing safe system budget checks. So they're basically reviewing any planned capital or other projects to make sure that they aren't unintentionally increasing the chance for a severe crash to occur. And then third, and this is especially for agencies that are distributing funding, they're actually reevaluating their project prioritization frameworks. So investments are guided by safety criteria as part of the consideration and focus where they can have the greatest concentrated impact. So ultimately, this tool helps agencies move beyond kind of those scattered investments and towards strategic high impact safety funding and then investments. I really like this example. Worked on this project a while ago. This is from the Nashville Department of Transportation. And so what they wanted to do is they wanted to integrate complete streets treatments into all of their work instead of treating it as a separate effort with separate funding, right? Which is often sometimes how we see safety. And so they did an audit of their funding sources to look for the best opportunities to enhance this integration. So as you can see, they identified proactive funding sources like long-term capital spending plans and coordinated investments across agencies as an opportunity to fund complete streets efforts. They also identified those opportunistic funding resources, so they were able to incorporate complete streets into things like resurfacing projects, developer contributions, and cost-sharing opportunities. They decided that their discretionary funds were still part of the mix and important, but that they would use those strategically to fill gaps and move complete streets projects along on priority corridors. And then ultimately, this all complemented their responsive funding. So it wasn't only source that they relied on to get things accomplished. They now had a more systemic process in place. And over time, they're still working on this. The goal is for safety to become a standard outcome of all transportation investments. So I think this is a really nice example of trying to think through how to make every dollar a safety dollar at your own agencies. So this next tool is about implementing a safe system speed management program. If any of you have any in place, again, pop it in the chat. Would love to hear about it. This tool is important for institutionalizing the safe system because the speed, as we know, it plays an oversized role in traffic fatalities and serious injuries, especially among vulnerable road users. So managing speed, talking about speed is really one of the most powerful ways to reduce serious injuries and fatalities. A lot of agencies now, again, I don't know if there are any in Kansas, but keep us posted, are developing speed management action plans. So they provide a comprehensive platform for agencies and stakeholders to collaborate on identifying and implementing the best speed management strategies for your particular area. The Federal Highway Administration very kindly, they promote several speed management countermeasures, and that includes projects and programs and policies. And they actually created a process, you can see it on the slide here, to really frame out and help people develop these plans. They're similar to other plans. They include vision and goals, speed data collection and analysis, prioritization of locations, selection of appropriate countermeasures, and then facilitating ongoing monitoring and evaluation. So speed management programs, and specifically these action plans, can be created at the local, regional, and state levels. And then here's an example again. This last time we go back to Bellevue, Washington, but they have a really great speed program out there. So the city developed the speed management plan, and they use Federal Highway's 5-step framework that I just showed you on the last slide. And they wanted to take a closer look at speeding and safety issues on their arterial streets, especially those posted at 30 miles per hour and above. So they classify these arterials into different categories based on speed limits, surrounding land use, and that ultimately helped them identify context-sensitive countermeasures. They also created a corridor sorting tool that scores streets based on safety data, community need, and infrastructure factors, so they can prioritize where to focus first. And then to measure progress, they're actually tracking both network-wide and corridor-specific performance indicators. So they're reviewing system trends annually and evaluating individual corridors about a year after improvements are made. So again, they've set up this really structured, data-driven approach, and it's helping the city manage speed consistently, and then refine those strategies over time. So this tool is similar-ish to the last one. It's about enabling contextual speed limit setting. It's important for institutionalizing the safe system because, similar to the last tool, speed plays a large role in increasing the severity of crashes. This tool, unlike the setting of a whole speed management program or plan, this one focuses specifically on setting speed limits based on the context of the roadway. So things like, what's the surrounding land use? What's the multimodal activity? And then what's the overall level of safety risk, rather than relying on that one-size-fits-all standard to set speed. A key concept for this one is really aligning the 4 types of speed. So statutory speed is set by the state, posted speed is what drivers see on the sign, design speed is what's influenced by the roadway geometry, and then target speed is the safest operating speed based on the context and the people using the street. So traditionally, a lot of jurisdictions have relied heavily on the 85th percentile rule, which can actually lead to speed limits being raised even when the surrounding environment suggests that vehicles should be going slower. But increasingly, we are seeing a shift toward setting speeds based more on the context of the roadway. I think one challenge really to keep in mind is that many of the target speeds that we do want, especially in places with pedestrians and cyclists, aren't always achievable when they're paired with the existing roadway design. People are still going to go just as fast as they're going, even if you just lower the speed limit. So just think about speed limits alone can only do so much. They can do a little, but they can only do so much without also reevaluating roadway design, which is a critical piece of this too. And while local agencies in Kansas often do have the ability to adjust speed limits, it usually has to be supported by an engineering study. And in practice, that process can get a little blurry, especially when guidance relies on broad engineering discretion and language and judgment. So just another plug of why having a clear, safe system line tool and a speed management plan are going to be more increasingly valuable. And then, okay, it's a California example. Don't roll your eyes. I definitely have a way to apply this in Kansas. But in California, they passed some legislation that made a major shift in how speed limits can be set. So instead of relying on the 85th percentile, the law does allow local agencies to consider context. It also extends lower default speeds in business and residential areas, and it just gives agencies more flexibility to reduce speeds on their own. Importantly, it also allowed cities to lower speed limits that were previously raised due to speed surveys, even if the roadway itself hadn't changed. I think importantly, they were able to make these changes without waiting for the immediate physical redesign, which helped them align policy with safety outcomes just much more quickly. Again, the two usually go hand in hand, but they saw an opportunity and took it. And so I think for other states, the takeaway isn't necessarily to replicate this exact bill, but it's really to just as a reminder to look closely at your own statutory framework and really think about what the barriers are to changing speed limits and what are the solutions to address that. Again, another key lesson I hit on a little bit is that policy change can move faster than physical redesign. So adjusting posted speeds when supported by the data and paired with enforcement and communication can help align policy with safety goals more quickly as you're waiting for some of those longer term design changes to be planned. And then next tool in this particular toolbox is sometimes a little bit of a controversial tool, but it does focus on enabling automated traffic enforcement. So things like speed safety cameras, red light cameras, work zone cameras, and others to really improve compliance with traffic laws without relying solely on the in-person enforcement. This tool is important for institutionalizing the safe system approach because it does provide redundancy for a lot of the other high impact strategies that you're using. Automated enforcement can be used to enforce compliance with those speed limits that you set and the traffic control devices that you have. In some places, automated enforcement gets a bad rap, or it's really challenging politically, but just a reminder that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can start slowly with pilots or in critical areas like in school zones or work zones if there is some appetite for this. You may or may not be aware that safety cameras are not explicitly prohibited in Kansas, but they are also not currently in use anywhere in the state. KDOT, through the Drive to Zero plan, is exploring the potential for piloting safety cameras, likely for speeding in work zones or school zones, or for those school bus stop arm violations. But the pilot would not be for the purposes of enforcement or revenue generation, but rather just to test the technology, understand any behavioral change, and try to get a sense for how people are viewing it in the state. Haley, who introduced me, is helping lead this effort and is more than happy to field some questions if you have them for her. So just a quick example is in Maryland. I live in Washington, D.C., so I'm in Maryland quite a bit, and so I'm very familiar with this program. Automated enforcement is and has been in effect for several years. It's focused where the risk is highest, so especially in residential neighborhoods and school zones and work zones in particular. They did pair speed limit setting with the speed cameras to really better protect vulnerable road users. They're also not treating enforcement as a one-off, so it's not like a camera here, camera 6 miles away, camera 12 miles away from that. They're using a corridor-based approach to really reinforce compliance across the network. Cameras are also periodically relocated, so enforcement isn't getting over concentrated in one spot, and so people don't just get used to the cameras and then speed up after or before, so they're mixing it up. And actually, over time, they saw a significant decline in extreme speeding, along with reductions in serious fatal crashes. And because the program is actually highly visible, it's well understood, it's really maintained some strong public awareness and support locally. So that wraps up theme B, and only 4 more tools after this. But before we go on, we'll just pull up another tool to see if any of these really resonated with you. And again, if you've got any examples to share, let us know. Haley, I don't know if anything's in the chat yet, but.
Not yet. You're doing great, Nicole.
All right. All right, looks like, oh, this one's shifting quite a bit. I don't have any predictions yet to share with you. It's a lot of movement. Okay. Yeah, so it looks like 3 of the tools are pretty on par with folks thinking they can make a difference. Is expanding the funding sources and allocations for safety, and then enabling automated traffic enforcement, and then with the enabling the contextual speed limit setting coming after that. It's great. Okay, let's close that poll. All right. So now we're transitioning to theme C, which focuses on design standards and project procedures. So By building safe system principles directly into project development procedures, safety gets prioritized early and consistently. And one of the most routine parts of transportation planning and engineering is looking at the manuals. So this theme does have 6 tools. I'm only going to be talking about 2 of them today. So this tool focuses on a review of your design guidelines and standards. This tool is important for institutionalizing the safe system because your design manuals shape thousands of everyday decisions. So if safety is not embedded there, it's really hard to achieve consistent outcomes when it comes to roadway design. Embedding safe system concepts into guidance also reduces reliance on individual judgment, and it makes safety choices really routine. The idea here is to do a comprehensive review and update of your standards. So they include solutioning and design principles that address crash exposure, the likelihood of a crash, and severity. So in practice, that could mean things like incorporating self-enforcing design techniques into your manuals, requiring bike lanes and sidewalks along mixed-use arterials, maybe considering different crash thresholds to trigger the implementation of proven solutions sooner. Not an exhaustive list, but just to give you some ideas of how you could just go through your guidance and really conduct an audit on it to see where safety can be better integrated. I think one important thing that we've seen through the years is that agencies really need to pair these updates with training. Just so planners, designers, and maintenance staff really are applying things in the guidance consistently from planning through to implementation. And ultimately, the goal is to really make safety the default design choice. But a lot of times these things get created and are either not used appropriately or people don't really know they exist or how to use them. So the training piece is significant. In Missouri, for the example, they developed what's called the blueprint for arterials to directly integrate safe system concepts into how arterials are planned and designed. What's helpful is that it aligns with existing planning and design workflows, so staff can use it as part of their routine process. This was not something separate, was not something they didn't understand or know about previously. They just took what they had and started to think about bringing safety into it even more. The blueprint emphasizes lower design speeds to reduce kinetic energy and crash severity. It also includes strategies to better manage conflict point to prevent severe crashes. In addition to kind of just the reactive design elements, it does also incorporate demand management as a strategy. So it also provides proven policy recommendations to enhance any design considerations. And I think, again, kind of most importantly, it provides clear guidance on when to use different strategies and how they align with national design standards, so AASHTO and NACTO, which really helps staff apply something confidently and consistently when they know it relies on best practices. So the second tool, this one, I like this one too. This example is pretty cool. It introduces a safe system design hierarchy. Some of you might have seen the image on the left. It's from a recent study that Federal Highway did maybe a couple of years ago. So essentially, it's a framework to help all of you prioritize which safety treatments will have the greatest impact. The tool is really important for institutionalizing the safe system because it recognizes that some treatments just have more substantial impacts than others on reducing the severity of crashes. So we all know that in real projects, there are constraints like cost, timeline, operations, public opinion, so we can't always do everything. This hierarchy helps focus first on the strategies that most effectively reduce crash severity. This is on Federal Highway's website. It's called the Safe System Design Hierarchy. And it organizes, as you can see, treatments into tiers. And it's a nice tool that you could use as a starting point if you wanted to do something similar with your solutioning. So at the top are strategies that remove or significantly reduce conflict points. So like eliminating crossing conflicts, removing fixed object hazards. Next are strategies that reduce speed, which are critical to lowering crash severity. Then come treatments that manage conflicts in time, like signal timing and right-of-way control. And then finally, measures that increase attentiveness and awareness. And the idea is just to create a consistent, systematic approach to decision making so that the most impactful safety strategies are just prioritized by default. Again, kind of taking the thinking out of the process if you do the pre-work. And then this is, I think, a cool example of that hierarchy by an agency. This is a DOT, but again, I think this is something that can be done by local agencies and MPOs. So WashDOT was actually one of the first agencies in the US to introduce the hierarchy. They did it actually back in 2019, before that federal highway tool was even developed. And like the framework, WashDOT's hierarchy helps prioritize policies and countermeasures based on what will be the most effective at reducing severe crashes. So one key difference is that WashDOT's approach is a bit more holistic and rooted in the public health thinking. So it starts with some of those upstream strategies like eliminating or reducing risky travel needs or encouraging safer mode choices before jumping straight into some of those engineering fixes. But as you move down the tiers, it includes more traditional tools like design changes, operational strategies, education, enforcement, and then broader policy or programmatic controls. And then the final tier actually even considers personal protective measures included for work zones. So they actually continue to use this hierarchy today as part of their decision making for their strategic highway safety plan and their highway safety improvement program. So again, setting something up like this just really helps your brain get organized and helps people focus on what's most important. So with that, we've got another polling question before we get to the last two tools is, which of these two might be things you want to try out at your agency? Okay, it looks like these are coming in pretty equal. All right, yeah, the review of the design guidelines inched out the hierarchy of treatment selection, but both very similar in their percentage of votes. So, all right, last two tools. We're almost there. Okay, so this theme is about better integrating land use and transportation, so we create a more cohesive, accessible system for everyone. So at the population level, the way we plan development and mobility options really does directly affect safety. When we're able to provide more connected routes, mode travel choices, and bring destinations closer together, we can reduce vehicle miles of travel. And when we reduce vehicle miles of travel, we are hopefully reducing overall exposure to crash risk. So this isn't just about designing safer streets, it's about shaping communities in ways that systematically lower risk in the first place. This theme has a lot of tools. It actually has 9 tools, and I'm only discussing 2 today, but this whole toolkit was developed by focus groups and with a lot of practitioners from DOTs, MPOs, and local agencies. And this was the topic that folks really kept coming back to as something they want to do more with to really impact safety. So just a little disclaimer on this one. So this tool is, it's not like easy, it doesn't really roll off the tongue, but this tool is called Right Sizing Infrastructure by Making Demand Forecast Adjustments. And basically, it focuses on integrating transportation demand management and operation strategies into how you're forecasting future travel. So you're not just automatically planning for road widenings as your default solution. I think a lot of you have used or know that long-range models and transportation impact studies often assume steady growth in peak hour driving. And when you assume that there's going to be more vehicles, it can lead to overbuilt roads in intersections, which creates more high-speed exposure and creates more conflict points, especially for people walking and biking. So instead, this tool is encouraging agencies to really integrate transportation demand and operations strategies into future forecasts so that the growth assumptions of vehicles on the road are different. So when you incorporate things like telework, pricing, carpooling, better transit service into these projections, all things that can reduce VMT, roads may not become overbuilt by default. In addition, operational tools like signal timing, dynamic lane management can really improve person throughput, again, without adding lanes or overbuilding. So the key idea is that, by considering demand and operations strategies, agencies can really right-size infrastructure and make safer, more multimodal decisions instead of defaulting to capacity expansion. Another California example, but again, I think can help you find the relevance in this is, so it is a helpful resource for agencies trying to better account for demand management in forecasting. It's called the CAP-COA Handbook for Quantifying TDM. It was developed in California to help planners basically estimate how different TDM strategies can reduce VMT, improve air quality, and support energy savings. And what makes it especially useful is that it includes practical lookup tables with vetted reduction factors for those strategies like parking pricing, transit studies, affordable housing, rideshare programs. So the information is all there for you of what the reductions would look like if you implemented these programs. So instead of assuming future travel demand will grow under the status quo, tools like CAP-COA have allowed agencies to model the impact of planned interventions. And again, even though this was developed in California, it can be very useful for agencies outside of the state. The core value isn't tied to California-specific policy. It's really just a structured methodology, and it gives you vetted reduction factors for estimating how different TDM strategies affect VMT and travel behavior. It also has great lookup tables as a starting point to customize and incorporate managed demand into travel forecasts. So it's a good resource to look at regardless. And then the last tool that I've got for you is this tool builds on the movement and place framework, and it introduces the idea of a layered multimodal network design. So what the heck are all those words, Nicole? So the basic concept is that not every corridor needs to do the same job. Some streets should prioritize moving people, moving goods, moving vehicles. While I think we can all agree, other roads should prioritize access and local activity and safety all in a place because there's more people hanging out there. So in a layered network, different transportation objectives are assigned to different corridors based on context, like freight and evacuation corridors or pedestrian-focused main streets. And it just helps agencies avoid designing every single road the same or every single road for maximum vehicle throughput. You're then now making your design decisions based on the context of the road. So again, design decisions that follow from those priorities include things like, what should the speed limit be if it's a movement road versus a place road? What should the level of separation be if it's a movement road versus a place road? So it's just a nice way to categorize your system. And then, yeah, for movement corridors, the focus may be on efficient vehicle and freight operations. And then in the place-focused areas, the emphasis shifts towards slower speeds, safer crossings, and low-stress walking. And then I think ultimately these layered networks really support safe system goal because they balance mobility and safety across the entire network rather than trying to make every street serve the same function. And then here's a neat example of layered networks in practice. So this is the Downtown Grid 3.0 mobility project. It's a good example of layered network planning in action. So Sacramento, as part of their central city specific plan, they created a multimodal framework, and it clearly identifies which corridors should prioritize transit, biking, walking, or vehicle travel. So instead of trying to make every street do everything, they assign different roles across the downtown grid to support a walk and transit vision that they had. And the result is really just a connected mode-specific network that helps align those design decisions with broader mobility and safety goals. So with that, do the last poll question here, and then it looks like I'm coming in right on time. We've got about 4 minutes for questions, or Haley's anything in the chat that is worth sharing? All right, looking at the poll here, this one also close in terms of people liking both of these tools. It looks like the multimodal network design came in higher at around 56%, but people are interested in that right sizing infrastructure at around 44%. So let me stop sharing that. Let me actually stop sharing my screen. I'll just see my face now. Does anyone have any questions? Or like I said, Haley, did anything pop up in the chat? And hopefully examples have been getting popped in as we go. Yep, looks like Caroline put a lot of good examples in there. The slides can definitely be made available. Yeah, I don't see anything too pressing in there. So Haley, I guess.
There's one question. I think it might have got buried in all my examples, but on the design hierarchy, someone asked whether the hierarchy of treatments should be different from area to area, depending on the frequency or crash patterns of that area.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go into the hierarchy. Federal Highway just provides a really nice framework for us to kind of pivot off of. But yeah, it's definitely should be based on, you know, your own kind of crash patterns and where you're located for sure. Actually, sorry, Haley, let me re-share the slides because I think you had two kind of wrap up slides you wanted to go through. 1 second.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Nicole. I think that was really informative, and hopefully you all have some good takeaways in here. So as we wrap up today, we're just going to plug a few kind of upcoming events. We do have a Drive to Zero Day at the Capitol coming up in March. This will be our 3rd year of doing that. So if you are around the Topeka area and would like to stop in during that, that was a great event. And then we, as Rebecca did say at the beginning, this is just a part of, we were kind of taking over the Roundabout series. So the next Roundabout webinar will be on April 10th at 11 a.m. The topic is still yet to be determined, but just wanted to plug that as well. We also will have our Transportation Safety Conference in Manhattan this year in April 21st through 22nd. But as you guys have filled out the poll during this webinar, we will continue to take that information and hopefully develop a Drive to Zero webinar series based on those topics. So specific to your needs and your interests of what you want to dive into with these toolkits a little bit more in depth. So be on the lookout for that information, and we'll continue that webinar series into 2026. Other than that, I think we are finished and you are free to go. As Rebecca said, they will post this information or the webinar recording on their YouTube page. And then we also have some links here. If you have any questions or information, requests for information, you can email our Drive to Zero inbox there at drivetozero@ks.gov. Thanks everybody for attending, and thank you, Nicole, for presenting for us. And everybody have a good weekend.